Hey, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Ryan, and in today's video, we'll be going over The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. So, let's get into it. Morgan starts off the book with going over a story of when he worked at a valet in Los Angeles. He says one of their frequent guests was a technology executive. He was a very smart man, and he designed a key part in the Wi-Fi router in his 20s. He says he also had an interesting relationship with his money, one that Housel describes as a mix of insecurity and childish stupidity. He carried a stack of $100 bills several inches thick. He showed his money to everyone that wanted to see it and to those who also weren't interested. Needless to say, he bragged way too much. Often while drunk too, which probably, as you can imagine, oftentimes won't end well. One time he handed Morgan's colleagues several $1,000s in cash and said, "Go to the jewelry store and get me a few $1,000 coins." A few hours later, they were on the dock skipping them into the Pacific Ocean. Another time, he had broken a lamp in the hotel suite he was staying in, and when confronted by the manager, he said, "You want 500? Here's $5,000. Now get out of my face and never insult me like that again." The premise of this book is to teach that doing well with money has little to do with how smart you are, and more to do with how you behave. By the way, I've made a free Notion template for you. It's got all 7 days of the week, so you can organize your messy schedule. I'll leave it linked below, and it's in my bio. Make sure you go check it out. Chapter 1 was labeled, "No One's Crazy," and let me tell you about a problem. It may make you feel better about what you do with your money, and a bit less judgmental about what some people do with theirs. Some people do crazy stuff with money, right? But no one's actually crazy. Because here's the thing, right? People born from different generations, born from different parents who earned different incomes, who held different values, and all of these, factors, experiencing all these different things, learn very different things, right? So, everyone has their own experience of how the world works. Therefore, what you learn could potentially seem crazy to someone like me, and vice versa. You probably know things about money that I don't, of course, because I'm only 14 and you're probably older than that. But the person who grew up in poverty thinks about risk and rewards in the ways a child of a wealthy banker could never understand if he tried, no matter what level of open-mindedness you actually have, right? The Australian who hasn't seen a recession in over 30 years has seen something an American never experienced. The list of different views goes on and on, of course. It's practically limitless. And in his book on 1930s America, Frederick Lewis Allen wrote, "The Great Depression marked millions of Americans inwardly for the rest of their lives." But there was a range of experiences. 25 years later, when he was running for president, John F. Kennedy was asked by a reporter what he remembered during the Great Depression. He remarked, and this is actually something interesting, he remarked, "I have no first-hand knowledge of the Great Depression. My family had one of the great fortunes of the world, and it was worth more than ever then. We had bigger houses, more servants, we traveled more. About the only thing that I saw directly was when my father hired some more gardeners just to give them a job so that them and their families could eat. I really did not learn about the Depression until I read about it in Harvard. That was a major point in the 1960 election. People thought, how could someone with no understanding of the economy during the Depression run our country and be put in charge of the economy?" The challenge for us is that no amount of studying or open-mindedness can genuinely create that level of fear and uncertainty. I can read or hear about what it was like to lose absolutely everything in the Great Depression, but I don't have the emotional scars, or I haven't had the experience of those who have actually experienced it, right? Of course. Spreadsheets could model the historic frequency of big stock market declines, but I don't have the emotional scars. I don't have the feeling of coming home, looking at your kids, and wonder if you've made a mistake that impacts their lives, makes it worse. And studying history makes you feel like you understand something. But until you've lived through it and personally felt its consequences, you can't understand it enough to change your behavior. We all think we know how the world works, but we only understand a sliver of it. Chapter 2 is luck and risk. And if you know me, I personally don't believe in luck. I believe in hard work. I believe in good karma. But luck and risk are siblings, okay? They are both the reality that every outcome in life is guided by forces other than individual effort. NYU professor Scott Galloway has a related idea that is so important to remember when judging success, both your own and others. Nothing is as good or as bad as it seems. Now, let me tell you about Bill Gates. And actually, this was actually something I found really interesting while reading this book. Bill Gates grew up on one of the only high schools that had a computer. That school is Lakeside High, and its story is actually quite remarkable. Bill Duggal was a World War II Navy pilot who later got into teaching math and science. He believed that book study wasn't enough without real-life experience, and he also realized that we need to know something about computers when we get to college. Recalled Paul Allen, late Microsoft co-founder. In 1968, Duggal petitioned the Lakeside School Mothers Club to use the proceeds from their annual rummage sale, around $3,000, which is crazy, to lease a teletype Model 30 computer, hooked up to the General Electric mainframe terminal for computer time sharing. The whole idea of time sharing only got invented in 1965, Gates later said. Someone was pretty forward-looking. Most university graduate schools didn't have a computer nearly as advanced as Bill Gates had access to in the 8th grade. Gates was 13 years old when he met classmate Paul Allen. The two hit it off. They both loved the computer. Bill and Paul could play with the computer anytime they liked after school. Needless to say, they quickly became computing experts. In 1968, there were roughly 303 million kids in high school. Only 18 million in the US. Around 270,000 lived in Washington State. Close to 100,000 lived in Seattle. About 300 attended Lakeside High. From 303 million to 300 kids. Of course, I'm not a firm believer in luck, but Bill Gates was sure fortunate to attend Lakeside High. Imagine where Microsoft would be without him. Honestly, probably non-existent. If there had been no Lakeside High, there wouldn't have been no Microsoft, he told the graduating class of 2005. Gates is very smart and even more hardworking. He had a vision for computers. He had a 1 in a million chance by getting to go to Lakeside High. Then there's Kent Evans, who's the third in the trio. But he experienced risks, close sibling, luck. Kent and Bill became good friends in 8th grade, and the two talked a lot over phone, Gates recalls. Still, he remembers Kent's phone number. Kent was just as skilled as Bill and Paul, at the computer, of course. The school once couldn't put the school system together, so they tasked Bill and Paul with putting together a computer program that could help them. And they did, and it worked perfectly. But unlike Paul, Kent shared Bill's business mind and endless ambition. Kent always had a big briefcase, kind of like a lawyer's briefcase. They were always scheming about what they'd want to be when they grow up. Should we be CEOs, ambassadors, maybe generals? Whatever they were to do, they knew they'd do it together. Bill talks about Kent with passion. We could have gone to college together, and Kent could have been a part of Microsoft. But it would never happen. Kent died in a mountaineering accident before graduating high school. The odds of being killed on a mountain before high school is around 1 in a million. Bill Gates experienced 1 in a million luck by ending up at Lakeside. Kent Evans experienced 1 in a million risk by never getting to finish what he and Bill were meant to finish. The lesson in this chapter is, if you give luck and risk the proper respect, you realize that when judging people's financial success, both you and others, it's never as good or as bad as it seems. Chapter 3 is never enough. John Bogle, the founder of Vanguard, who recently passed away in 2019, told a story about money that highlights something we don't think about enough. At a party thrown by a billionaire on Shelter Island, Kurt Vonnegut tells his friend Joseph Heller that their host, a hedge fund manager, has made more money in a single day than Heller had earned from his wildly popular Catch-22 novel over the course of its entire history. Heller responded, "Yes, but I have something he will never have." Enough. Enough. A simple yet powerful word. For a critical element of our society, including many of the most wealthiest and powerful among us, there seems to be no limit on what enough entails. So here's 2 examples of the dangers of not having enough and what they can teach us. Reet Gupta was born in Kolkata, orphaned as a teenager. People talk about the privileges of the few that start life on third base. Gupta couldn't even see the baseball stadium. What he went on to achieve is incredible. By his mid-40s, Gupta was CEO of McKinsey, the world's most prestigious consulting firm. He retired in 2007 to take on roles at the United Nations and World Economic Forum. He partnered on philanthropic projects with Bill Gates. He sat on the board of directors on 5 public companies. He went from the slums of Kolkata to one of the wealthiest businessmen ever. With that success came a crazy amount of wealth. By 2008, he was said to have more than 100 million. That is an unbelievable amount of wealth to most. He could have done anything he wanted. And what he wanted wasn't to be a millionaire. He wanted that big $1 billion. And he wanted it real bad. Gupta sat on the board of directors of the Goldman Sachs, which surrounded him with some very, very wealthy investors. Gupta found a lucrative side hustle. In 2008, as Goldman Sachs stared at the wrath of the financial crisis, Warren Buffett plans to invest $5 billion into the bank to help keep it afloat. So, as a Goldman insider, Gupta learned of this way before the public, and 16 seconds later dialed an investor named Raj Sethi. The call wasn't recorded, but afterwards Raj bought 175,000 shares of Goldman Sachs. You can probably guess what they discussed. The Buffett-Goldman deal was announced hours later. Goldman stock surged. Raj made a quick million. And this is just one example of the alleged trend. Gupta insider tips led to $17 million being made. It was easy money and an easy case for prosecutors. Both Gupta and Raj went to prison for insider trading. Reputations ruined. Now consider Bernie Madoff. His crime is well known. Madoff is one of the most notorious Ponzi schemers since Charles Ponzi himself. For those of you that don't know what a Ponzi scheme is, which I didn't know either when I first read this, it's a form of fraud in which the belief of success is of a non-existent enterprise fostered by the payments of quick returns from the first investors from money invested by later investors. Madoff swindled investors for 2 decades before his crime was revealed, which was 2 weeks after Gupta's endeavor. What's overlooked is that Madoff, like Gupta, was more than a fraudster. For the Ponzi scheme that made Madoff well known, he was a successful and legitimate businessman. He was a market maker, a job that matches buyers with the sellers of stocks. The question we should ask is why? Why would someone worth hundreds of $1,000,000 risk it all just for more money, right? That seems stupid, honestly. Gupta and Madoff had differences, but they shared one key ideal. They didn't have a sense of enough, and Morgan Housel says, if you want to know when enough is enough, remember, the hardest financial skill is getting the goalpost to stop moving, but it's one of the most important. If expectations rise with the results, there's no logic in striving for more because you'll feel the same after putting in more effort. It gets dangerous when the taste of having more increases ambition more than satisfaction. In that case, one step forward pushes the goalpost 2 steps away. 2. Social comparison is the problem here. Let's say a rookie baseball player makes $500,000 a year. He is, by any definition, rich. But let's say he plays on the same team as Mike Trout, who has a 12-year, $430 million contract. By comparison, the rookie's broke. But then you think about Mike Trout, $36 million a year is insane. But to make it on the list of the top paid hedge fund managers, you need to make $340 million a year. And then that same person would have to compare themselves to someone earning at least $770 million a year to make it onto the list of the top 10 or so hedge fund managers. And just the list goes on and on and on to Warren Buffett, whose personal fortune increased by $3.5 billion in 2018. Yeah, but it goes on and on. The point is that the ceiling of social comparison is so high, virtually no one will hit it. Which means it's a battle that can never be won. The only way to win is to never fight it in the first place. To accept that you have enough. Chapter 4, Confounding is Compounding. Lessons from one field can often apply to another, completely unrelated fields. For example, take the Ice Age and what it can teach us about money. In the early 1900s, a Serbian scientist named Milutin Milinkovic studied the Earth's position relative to different planets and came up with a theory of ice ages that we now know are correct, or at least accurate. The gravitational pull of the sun and the moon gently affect the Earth's motion and tilt towards the sun during parts of the cycle, which can last tens of thousands of years. Each of the Earth's hemispheres get a little more or less rotation than they're supposed to, and that's when it starts. Milutin's theory initially assumed that a tilt of the Earth's caused extremely cold winters, cold enough to turn the planet to ice. However, a Russian meteorologist named Vladimir Kopin dug farther and discovered something. Moderately cool summers and cold winters were not the issue. It starts when the summers aren't cold enough to melt the snow from last winter, and then more snow gets piled on top, which increases the odds of summer not being able to melt the snow. Then more snow, more cool summers, which leads to a continental ice sheet over hundreds of years. The same thing can happen in reverse. An orbital tilt letting more sunlight melts more snow, which reflects less light in the following years, which increases temperatures that prevents more snow the next year, on and on and on. That's the cycle. And the thing is, it doesn't matter how much snow is left after summer. As long as it's a thin sheet, it'll build up to be a massive glacier. The takeaway here is you don't need tremendous forces to create tremendous results. If something compounds, a small base will turn into extraordinary results. The same thing is with money. If you have a bank account with interest, it'll become bigger and bigger over time. And the message here is, if something compounds and becomes bigger over time, the hardest part is getting started. Once you've started, it's smooth sailing, and you just need to keep piling money on top, and it'll grow. Those were some lessons that I thought were really important from the beginning, the first 3 chapters or so. But now, at the end, close to the end of the book, it is chapter 19, all together now. What we've learned about the psychology of your own money, and this talks about some good stuff, and it's essentially just a summary, but I thought that it has some really good lessons in it, and I'm just going to read from it, and I think that's the best way to teach you and pass along this without this whole unnecessary skipping chapters and reading whole chapters. The first lesson, I guess, or summary is, go out of your way to find humility when things are going right, and forgiveness or compassion when they go wrong. Because it's never as good or as bad as it looks. The world is big and complex. Risk and luck are both real and hard to identify. Do so when judging both yourself and others. Respect the power of luck and risk, and you'll have a better chance of focusing on things you can actually control. You'll also have a better chance of finding the right role models. Number 2 is less ego, more wealth. Saving money is the gap between your ego and your income, and wealth is what you don't see. So wealth is created by suppressing what you could buy today in order to have more stuff or more options in the future. No matter how much you earn, you will never build wealth unless you can put a lid on how much fun you can have with your money right now, today. Manage your money in a way that helps you sleep at night. That's different from saying you should aim to earn the highest returns or save a specific percentage of your income. Some people won't sleep unless they're earning some of the highest returns. Others will only get a good rest if they're conservatively invested. To each their own. But the foundation of, does this help me sleep at night, is the best universal guidepost for all financial decisions, and it's something you should ask yourself before you make a financial decision. If you want to do better as an investor, the single most powerful thing you can do is increase your time horizon. Time is the most powerful force in investing. It makes little things grow and big mistakes fade away. It can't neutralize luck and risk, but it pushes results closer towards what people deserve. Become okay with things going wrong. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune, because minority of things account for the majority of outcomes. No matter what you're doing with your money, you should be comfortable with a lot of stuff not working. That's just how the world is. And so you should always measure how you've done by looking at your full portfolio rather than individual investments. It is fine to have a large chunk of poor investments and a few outstanding ones. That's usually the best case scenario. Judging how you've done by focusing on individual investments makes winners look more brilliant than they are, and losers appear more regrettable than they should. Use money to gain control over your time, because not having enough control of your time is a powerful and universal drag on happiness. The ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want to, pays the highest dividend that exists in finance. Be nicer and less flashy. Now, this is something that I think is very, very important, because no one is impressed with your possessions as much as you are. You might think that you want a fancy car or a nice watch, but what you probably want is respect and admiration. And you're more likely to gain those things through kindness and humility more than horsepower and chrome. Save. Just save. You don't need a specific reason to save, although it's great to save for a car, a down payment, a medical emergency, but saving for things that are impossible to predict or define is one of the best reasons to save. Everyone's life is a continuous chain of surprises. Savings that aren't earmarked for anything in particular is a hedge against life's inevitable ability to surprise the hell out of you at the worst possible moment. Define the cost of success and be ready to pay it, because nothing worthwhile is free. Everything costs a certain amount of money or time or brain power. And remember that most financial costs don't have visible price tags. Uncertainty, doubt, and regret are common costs in the finance world. They're often worth paying, but you have to view them as fees, a price worth paying to get something nice in exchange, rather than fines, a penalty you should avoid. Worship room for error. A gap between what could happen in the future and what you need to happen in the future in order to do well is what gives you endurance. And endurance is what makes you compounding magic over time. Room for error often looks like a conservative hedge, but it keeps you in the game and can pay for itself many times over. Avoid the extreme ends of financial decisions. Everyone's goals and desires will change over time, and the most extreme your past decisions were, the more you may regret them as you evolve. You should like risk because it pays off over time, but you should be paranoid of renewous risk because it will prevent you from taking future risks that will pay off over time. Define the game you're playing and make sure your actions are not being influenced by people playing a different game. Respect the mess. Smart, informed, and reasonable people can disagree in finance because people have vastly different goals and desires. There's no single answer, just the right answer that works for you. That's the end of that chapter. That's pretty much all I had to say today, and thanks for watching. Make sure you remember to get my free Notion template. I'll leave it linked below, or I'll leave it linked below, and it's in my bio. Make sure you go check it out. Also have a free Discord community that you can join. I'll leave the link below. It's in my bio also. And I hope you have a good rest of your day. And until next time.